afternoon. Welcome to our webinar and welcome to Supply Chain Now Radio. We're broadcasting live today from the supply chain capital of the East Coast, Atlanta, Georgia. Today's episode is powered by APICS Atlanta and the Effective Syndicate. My name is Scott Luton. I serve as your host for today's session. I also serve as both EVP of APICS Atlanta and on the APICS Southeast District staff. So what is APICS, you ask? Well, we're going to provide background on that question in just a moment. Our session today is going to be focusing on common mistakes that organizations make that hinder continuous improvement. While we typically feature best practices in these sessions, today the focus is more on practices to avoid if you'd like to maximize your continuous improvement efforts. We have an exceptional guest speaker today in Beau Groover of the Effective Syndicate. More about Beau in just a minute. But as always, we're glad you've chosen to join us here today. So first, let's tackle our ground rules. So all attendees will be on mute as we're looking to optimize the audio experience. With that said, let's make it as interactive as possible. So please do submit your questions via the chat toolbar. Again, this is a live session. We're going to answer as many questions as we have time for at the conclusion of today's webinar. Finally, a PDF of today's presentation and the recording will be sent out in the next few days to each of our registrants. As I've mentioned, today's webinar is brought to you in part by the APICS Atlanta chapter. For those of you new to APICS, we are the premier industry association dedicated to end-to-end supply chain management. Our organization offers membership and professional development, a wide range of education opportunities, industry-leading research and publications, and widely recognized professional certifications. But more than anything else, APICS is about people. Our organization has over 45,000 members in over 100 countries. APICS has 195 North American chapters that serve a wide variety of key geographic markets, including our newest chapter in the dynamic logistics market of Savannah, Georgia. You may recognize our leading certifications, such as our CPIM, our CSCP, and our newest certification, our CLTD. If you want more information on how we can serve you or your organization, please feel free to reach out to APICS directly or those of us on the board here at APICS Atlanta. We're happy to help. You can also find out more information on our organization at apics.org or locally at apicsatlanta.org. Okay, so let's share a little more information about our speaker today. You're in for a treat to our audience. Beau Groover is founder and president of the Effective Syndicate, who's on a mission to help organizations and individuals simply become more effective. Beau brings more than 20 years of experience to the table, primarily in the manufacturing and operations space. He's held leadership positions in companies such as the Coca-Cola Company, Nordson Corporation, WestRock, formerly Rock 10, and Serta Simmons Bedding. He holds a wide variety of academic credentials, including his Master Black Belt certification and MBA. In Atlanta, we are very pleased to have recently added Beau to our executive advisory board that helps guide our nonprofit local chapter. APICS Atlanta has been serving Georgia for over 50 years. So with all that said, again, you're in for a treat today. Here is Mr. Beau Groover.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. The weather here in Atlanta is just beautiful as we move into fall. So hopefully everybody's having a great Friday morning. And again, thanks for joining us. So the agenda today, as Scott mentioned, is really about some common pitfalls that I've encountered over the last 20 years. And I wanted to share these with you, just hopefully to help your continuous improvement system be more effective. We're going to talk a little bit about the background and some principles of continuous improvement. Then I want to talk a little bit to or about executives and sponsors. Hopefully there's some executives and sponsors on the call today. And then the four things that I see where we create complexity where it's not necessary. And that is in the project charters, charts and requirements, overly detailed agendas, and then the post-event or after-event follow-up. So as we go along, as Scott mentioned, we want this to be interactive. For sound quality, we keep the phone on mute, but there is the chat opportunity. And then at the end of it, we'll take a few minutes and hopefully have some good questions from you guys. And what we'd ask you to do is, as the webinar is going on, is think about your questions as we go. Could be questions about your current continuous improvement approach, or perhaps you're just about to start continuous improvement. So those questions are certainly welcome. Questions about culture. And then what if questions. Those are always good exploratory. What if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if we did this? And then finally, questions about change. A big part of continuous improvement, or effective continuous improvement, is about change management and change leadership. So those are the types of questions that we would like to further the conversation as we go. The webinar should last 30 to 40 minutes-ish, and we will have 10 or 15 minutes for questions at the end. So a couple of years back, after doing Lean Six Sigma for many, many years, I founded the Effective Syndicate, and it's based on this principle. So in my heart, I believe if we take great people and we put them in great processes, the only results that we should expect would be amazing results. And so we work on the great people side with leadership, teamwork, communication, and teaching organizations how to utilize values-based management. And then on the process side is lean manufacturing, lean enterprise, and Six Sigma. The difference between lean manufacturing and lean enterprise is really that these principles, while they started on the production floor many years ago, these principles are global. There's no business on the face of the planet where these principles of continuous improvement don't apply. And then lastly, the results. Unless you're a nonprofit, most companies are in business to make money. If you're a public company, you're working on shareholder value and stock price. If you're a private company, you're working for the owners of the company, but you're in business to make money. And then revenue, so sales growth, growth in general, right? So expanding markets, expanding products, those sorts of things. But I put morale at the top because as adults, we spend more time at work than we do virtually anywhere else. We spend more time at work than we do with our family, at our homes. And according to Gallup, over 70% of the American workforce is either disengaged or actively disengaged. So disengaged means, hey, I kind of don't care. I'm just showing up to get a check. I'm just here. Actively disengaged means they're either intentionally or unintentionally working against the company. They're actually pulling back from the success of the organization. And as a human, I think we can have a great influence on the people that work with us and work for us if we improve our work environment. So the teamwork, communication, leadership stuff is crucial, and it creates a lot of passion for me. It's a big part of the reason I started this company. So for the most part, we're looking at great processes today. However, you can't separate people and process. Your culture that you have drives the processes that you have in place, and then your processes either support or contradict your culture. So I see a lot of organizations have really great processes in place, but they haven't spent enough time on the people side, so they're getting better, but not nearly as fast or nearly as good as they could be. And then I have companies who spend a lot of time making their people feel good, so everybody's happy, but they're not very effective because they haven't invested in the processes. So the two things have to work in unison. You have to work on both of them with the equal amount of focus and attention if you really want to build an amazing organization. To that end, this is one of my favorite quotes. Excuse me. Peter Drucker is credited with this quote, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what he meant by that, and I've never obviously talked to him, but what I've surmised that he meant by that is that if you got your culture right, it really doesn't matter what you put into the organization. They will find a way to be successful. It could be a downturn in the market. It could be losing your major customer. It could be launching a brand new, gigantic, exciting product. But when you got your culture right, the people will figure out how to make it work. Conversely, if you don't have your culture right, it doesn't matter how well you've articulated your strategy and what a great tagline you have and how beautiful your marketing stuff is. The people are going to either make it work or not make it work, and by default, letting it fail. So for me, culture is not just a thing, culture is the thing. So I'm going to pick on executives and sponsors for a minute. This is not meant as a finger-pointing thing. These are, again, my experiences of working with a lot of executives, all the way up to the C-level and, down to the VP and director level, and then people who serve as project sponsors. So the sponsor might be the person who allocates the resources or gets approval for the project or helps scope out and define the project. So that's the group of people we're talking about. Oftentimes, these folks are very demanding for results, usually because of their position, because somebody higher than them is demanding results. What are the results? What are the outputs? And as we talked about the principle, you've got to have great people buying into great processes to get the results that you want. Too often we get focused on the results without thinking about the inputs. So an executive may be pushing very hard for results without recognizing there's a people and or a process gap. My experience is most executives don't spend enough time on culture. I probably couldn't count the number of times where I'm talking to an executive and they tell me, man, we've got a group of people that have a can-do spirit and entrepreneurial work attitude, and they're making great stuff happen, which I'm really excited to see. And I go talk to the people and they're kind of miserable. They're going, I don't know what the guy's talking about. This place sucks. And so there's a disconnect. And it's, again, not really the fault of the executive, but recognize the further you're removed from the day-to-day operation, the less you understand about what's really happening on a day-to-day basis. And most executives take culture for granted. They've got an idea in their mind of what their culture is, but when you get into the muck of it, it's just not the same. Oftentimes they put a lot of pressure on the organization. So, hey, we've got to get this project done, and we've got to get that initiative done, and we've got to launch this new product, and we've got to fix that problem. So again, they're focused on the results more than they're focused on the inputs. Oftentimes they expect an instant return on investment. So, hey, Beau, you did a Kaizen last week, and I don't see it on my profit and loss statement yet. So there's some kind of expectation of, hey, we're doing a Kaizen, or we're doing a Six Sigma DMAIC project, and therefore money's going to just pop up on their desk. And it really doesn't work like that. There's certainly tactically defined projects that can be almost instantaneous. But if you think about transforming an organization, it's not going to happen overnight. I've seen a lot of them who are more focused on the sizzle rather than the steak. And by that, I mean they want a really whiz-bangy kind of presentation with super charts and graphs and a well laid out PowerPoint that tells this fantastic story, not recognizing that all of the work that goes into creating that fantastic PowerPoint takes away from people actually making an improvement to the process. So it's like, hey, I've got a perfectly great paint job on my car, but the engine doesn't run. The next thing that I see a lot of is most executives that I've encountered don't lead with or explain the why. Right? Why are we doing this? Why is this important? What does this mean for the people that work here? What does this mean for our customers? So they don't dive into enough of, Mr. Employee, I'm going to ask you to do some things differently. I'm going to ask you to do some more work, but we don't talk about why. And so it just feels like, all right, well, I thought I was doing a good job, but now they want to change it. So maybe I'm not doing a good job. I'm just being told what to do, so I'm going to go do it. And then lastly, most aren't highly versed on change management. So my guess is most of you have been through an employee survey recently, hopefully. And I bet one of the survey things that shows up almost every time is a lack of communication. So back to the explaining the why and back to the sizzle rather than the steak, a lot of companies say, well, I told them what needs to happen, or, I told them about the new project or the new product or whatever we're doing, but they don't allow the organization to buy into it. They don't allow them to ask questions and wrestle with it and get some ownership. It's just, all right, well, they told me to go do this, so I'm going to go do this. So if you're an executive or a sponsor and you're leading an organization, whether that's an entire company or a division or an office, reflect on some of these things, if you will, and challenge yourself of, are you doing some of these things that creates more challenge than is necessary. So I love this little slide. I was talking with an executive and very similar question. Beau, you did a Kaizen, last month, and I don't see it on my profit and loss statement yet. And I actually drew this, but I found a picture later. It's not a Pez dispenser, right? So you do a Kaizen and $10 pops up on the executive's desk. It just is not that transactional. Real continuous improvement is about a transformation. Real continuous improvement is about improving the entirety of the organization, not just the net profit number. And so keep in mind, if you're doing CI work or you're talking with folks in your organization, it is not a one-for-one transaction. I do a Kaizen, I get money. It's just doesn't work like that. So culture transformation, it takes time, right? So however long your organization has been in business is how long the current culture has been under construction. So the behaviors, the norms, the attitudes, the things that are okay in the organization have been under development for years, sometimes decades. And so if you're going to go after, hey, if you could buy into, we need a better culture, recognize that your current culture has been under development for a long, long time. And it's not a light switch. I can't go flip the switch and say, let there be a better culture. The second point is recognize that changing culture is hard. It's not easy. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of thinking behind it, but there is no, step-by-step recipe. Do this, then this, then this, then this, and poof, you've got a magic culture. It takes time, and a lot of companies either don't know how or aren't willing to wade into that. As a coach and a continuous improvement facilitator, my frustration is I can talk to these folks who are working on continuous improvement, and they're frustrated that they're not getting better fast enough. So hey, we've only improved by 3%, but they're not willing to do something different, which is, hey guys, recognize there's a cultural component that's missing if you're not seeing the results that you want. And then lastly, this is my fundamental belief: your culture, more than anything else, will determine how much your organization wins or loses. Unless you've got the world's best mousetrap that has no competition, your people will determine whether or not you win or lose, and by how much you win or lose. So for me, again, culture is not just a thing, it's the thing. So that's great, Beau. I signed up to hear about Strangling, my continuous improvement program, and all I'm hearing you talking about culture. So what I've learned in my experience, and hopefully this draws a close parallel for some of you guys, is that you can't separate your processes from your culture. The culture that you have is determining the processes that you put in place. And the organizations that I work with that have a really command and control kind of spirit, so corporate sets up here's the process, and then they send it out to the organization, say, okay, go follow this process. It's the culture, in my opinion, based on a lack of fundamental trust and fundamental understanding of human dynamics that causes that process to be in place. Likewise, that process then supports the culture. Right, so you can't separate the two. And then the answers that I hope you take with you is the best CI transformations engage and involve everyone in the workplace. So I grew up learning Lean. I grew up working with Lean first, and then later discovered Six Sigma. The thing that I love most about Lean is that I can get everybody involved. I can teach everybody how to do 5S. I can teach everybody how to do visual management. Six Sigma, conversely, while very powerful and a great weapon for improvement, is somewhat exclusionary, right? I've got to go to training to get the magic decoder ring. So now I'm a yellow belt, I'm a green belt, I'm a black belt. I've got the magic decoder ring. I'm allowed into the club. And the folks who aren't on those DMAIC projects usually get to deal with only the output from the project. So instead of being involved and bought in and getting a chance to voice their opinion, they're just, here's the outcome of this Six Sigma project, go do it. The next thing is the more you complicate it, the harder it becomes. So the more, I call them speed bumps you put in place, the harder it is to actually work on improvement, because as I'll explain in a minute, I become focused on avoiding the speed bump than I do focused on fixing something. And then the last one is the culture. If you allow it to be simple, people have a much better chance of thriving and making real improvement to whatever the problem is that they're working on. So let's move into now the tactical part of continuous improvement. The first thing most projects, whether it's a Kaizen or a DMAIC project of any sort, starts with is a charter. I've seen some organizations that literally had a 4-page charter. It looked like an income tax form. And so I'm a new belt, right? I just got trained, I got the decoder ring, and now I'm going to do a project. The first thing that I get to face is a 4-page charter to fill out. And it was not a simple project, or simple charter, excuse me. It was very detailed. It required a lot of absolute requirements. You must answer this question. You must have this piece of data. You must do this analysis. So before I even get started, I'm confronted with this thing that looks like a college math problem that I've got to fill out. And by the way, it's 4 pages long. So I've already got a full-time job and I'm busy. I want to be involved and make something better. So I signed up for Six Sigma. And now I've got to figure this 4-page charter out. Likewise, some of the charters require just a lot of data, mountains of data. You got to pull this data, you got to run this analysis, create this chart. And likewise, some of them include a particular chart, even if it doesn't apply to the problem that they're working on. I've seen organizations say you must do that analysis or that chart or use that Six Sigma tool. So the output or the result is that people become more focused on how to fill out the charter than they do on figuring out what the real problem is. Here in the West, as compared to the East, where most of this lean continuous improvement stuff was born, here in the West, we're gunslingers. We like to move into problem-solving mode, right? We talked about the executive level, putting pressure on it, high sense of urgency, just get it done. And what that causes is us not to spend enough time understanding the problem before we start making improvements. So we may understand, 40%, maybe even 50% of what's really happening, but because we're in such a hurry and we've got such a sense of urgency that we start trying to fix that, in reality, it takes us longer to solve problems than if we spend more time on the front end to really dive into what the problem statement is. The charter in this example becomes a diversion because now I'm concerned with filling out the charter well. So my coach or my sponsor or my boss will let my charter be approved. So now I'm focused on getting the charter done instead of understanding my problem. So I'm already slowing my efforts down. The best method I've seen is an A3 document. Hopefully some of you guys have seen an A3. It is literally a 9-box single sheet of paper. And what it forces you to do is to be able to tell the entire problem statement on one single sheet of paper in great detail. When I'm coaching a new person into continuous improvement, when I'm teaching continuous improvement, my approach is, can you articulate your problem with one sentence? And if you can't, if it takes you 5 minutes to describe the problem, either you've got it scoped too big, or you just haven't spent enough time understanding what the real problem is, right? So in my way of thinking is it's hunting with a rifle as opposed to a shotgun. I've got one target, I'm going to aim my rifle and I'm going to kill that target. If I try to kill the entire herd of animals with one shot, I'm probably going to miss all of them. So the next area is during the event or during the project that we're doing. I've seen organizations, again, that require a certain chart or a certain graph, or sometimes multiple. You must include these 3 charts and these 3 graphs. You must do this analysis or that analysis. You must always have at least 3 alternatives. And then the big one that I think is most stifling is I've seen organizations use, it's a daily form. And this company that I'm thinking of had 7 forms. So every day the team was tasked with, in addition to running the project, developing these 7 forms. And those 7 forms were reviewed every day. And what I was watching is this team, and it was a team of 10 people, they were spending almost 2 hours working on developing those 7 forms to review with a 15-minute meeting with an executive. So 2 hours, 10 people, that's 20 hours of work to prep for a 15-minute meeting because an executive told them to. And, it's like, wait a minute, guys, we're supposed to be being faster and more efficient. This is the opposite of it. And what I was coaching the executive on in this case was, hey, your requirements are diverting their attention away from making improvements. So how do we simplify what you're asking for in a daily update? Instead of these 7 forms, what's the thing you really want to know? Let's boil all this down and have one simple thing that doesn't take 10 people 2 hours to prepare for. And same thing, the output or the result of it is it causes people to spend more time thinking about what to document for that daily meeting than it does to spend time on working on how to make the process better. So my first speed bump was, holy crap, I got to fill out this 4-page charter. Now my second speed bump is, oh man, I got to keep track with all of this every day while I'm also trying to facilitate a team and fix this problem I'm working on. So our continuous improvement approach is being encumbered by our culture, right? We want to see everything. So we're putting all of this requirement on these teams. The other thing, I see organizations spend agonizing hours trying to come up with an agenda that is minute by minute. And the problem is some things will take longer than we thought, and some things will go much faster than we thought. But the teams, because during the coaching, this agenda was so important, now I see this agenda as it's like my Bible. It says I've got 15 minutes to discuss this topic. Guys, we've been on this topic for 12 minutes, so what are we going to do? And it forces us to make answers where oftentimes we may not be ready to make an answer or to have an answer, excuse me. So the other thing is it leads to having too many things to do, right? So we've got a 1-week Kaizen. Hey guys, let's solve world hunger and boil the ocean between Monday and Friday. It's silly. It's just silly. All of this, of course, has to be done before the actual event starts. So as you're developing the agenda, you may not have full visibility on what all of the problems are, right? You've got your good problem statement that you've developed, but you don't know the nuances of what's causing those problems. And so what we end up doing is trying to manage to a time clock instead of managing to what needs to get accomplished. So they strangle the event because people become more focused on managing the clock, right? What I like to do, the bottom line of this slide is what I do when I'm coaching teams, and even when I'm facilitating, is I will get in front of them at the beginning or end of the day and say, all right, guys, what do we need to accomplish today? If you do it at the end of the day, you could say, what do we need to accomplish tomorrow? I let them develop the agenda. They know the target. We've talked about it. We've talked about the problem statement. And I let them develop it. And then I say, all right, guys, we've got 9 things in front of us, and they're just headlines. It might be, clean the workstation. It might be improve the office supply closet. Whatever it is, they know what we're trying to do. They develop the agenda. I then say, all right, guys, we can bust our rear ends and get this stuff done and get out of here by 2 o'clock today, or we can be unfocused and fiddle fart around and we can stay till 8 o'clock at night. I kind of don't care. It's up to you. This allows them to feel ownership of what's happening, right? If they're giving handed an agenda in front of them, they say, all right, we got to do these 14 things today. They don't have any ownership. It's not their agenda. They're just following along because somebody told them to. Again, it is about sharing the leadership with them, sharing the ownership with them. The buy-in that you get when you let them create their own agenda, as long as it's focused on the right problem statement, is amazing. And you will be blown away by how much stuff a small group of people can get done in a day or in 3 days over an event. And then lastly, after the event, I've seen organizations that say you must track in the report the status of this project in this format every week for the next 12 weeks. So again, you must have this chart, you must have this picture, you must have this graph, you must have this data, track it, and report every 12 weeks.
Hey, Beau, this is Scott Luton. To our audience, we might be having a technical challenge here. Bear with us one moment. Hey, Beau, can you hear us? Okay, so to our audience, bear with us one moment as we get Beau back on the line. I think we got disconnected there. There we go. Okay, hey Beau, welcome back.
Hey, if there's anybody from AT&T on the phone, I'd like to have a Kaizen with you about not dropping a call during a webinar.
Okay, thanks.
So Scott, where did I leave off? Were we on the post-event slide? Were you guys still hearing me then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I apologize, everybody. That's the first time that's happened, and hopefully the last. But anyway, it's a whole bunch of requirements after the event is done to track it for a certain period of time, and again provide a very lengthy and detailed report back up to some senior level in the organization or some governing body of continuous improvement. And what this command and control type of approach fosters is a culture of alienation instead of a culture of inclusion. And so instead of me feeling like I'm empowered and encouraged to go make something happen, I feel like I'm being encouraged and empowered to create a report that the executive is asking for. So it's the opposite of the culture we want, right? It's all right, I'm going to do what I'm told. And if people are telling me everything to do, I'm probably not going to do anything more than that. Right? So I've got a high culture of accountability. I've got a command and control leadership team. They tell me what to do. That is all I'm ever going to be concerned with doing. As opposed to saying, hey, guys, go out there, make something awesome happen. Tell me how I can help you. Right? So the idea of turning people loose and letting them go knock stuff out is much more impactful, much more effective than, hey, here's our process, here's our 7-page charter and our 9 pages of everyday update, and you got to track it for the next 12 months and report up in this format there's nothing inspirational about that at all. It is just, all right, well, crap. And so these 4 things, think about, you're encouraging people to get involved. Hey, Joe, I want you to get involved and help us make this place better. Help us improve our processes. Well, okay, well, tell me how I do that. Well, you sign up for our continuous improvement program. Okay, well, what does that look like? Well, here's our charter. Here's our 4-page charter. You got to do all of this stuff before you start your project. And then during the project, while you're working with your team, here's the 7 forms that you got to keep up with every day while you're trying to facilitate that team. And then at the end, here's the reports that you got to do. You got to do this report every week for 12 weeks, and then you got to provide that report every month for 6 months to VP of this, that, or the other thing. Well, Joe's sitting there going, wait a minute, I've got a full-time job. I'm already busy. I just want to help the organization, but man, that's a lot of stuff. I don't think this is what I thought it was. This doesn't sound very exciting. And so what we've got to do is recognize, in some cases, we need to improve our continuous improvement approach. And almost all of it is driven by simplifying. So instead of forcing people into a step-by-step, very regimented, very rigid approach to continuous improvement, what we want to do is be inspirational and empowering and say, look, let's talk about the problem statement. Let's talk about how you're going to go do it. And then honestly getting the heck out of the way and letting them go do it. Now, if there are professional CI people on the phone, some of you guys may be living with this, right? So if that's the case, please shoot me an email or give me a call and let's talk through some strategies on how to improve it. If you're one of the executives on the phone and you're leading a team or you're leading an organization, I would ask that you reflect on it and saying, all right, how much burden am I putting on my continuous improvement system? Am I making it harder than it needs to be to make our processes better? So the kublerross change curve, some of you guys may have seen this before. You may have also seen it under team formation, using the phrase forming, storming, norming, and performing, same idea. But the culture takes time. And if you take a step back and you look and you say, man, we do have a very regimented approach. We do have requirements of every team that's out there and a whole bunch of forms and a whole bunch of data and a whole bunch of work. You're delaying this change curve. And when it gets here to the frustration and depression part, you may get lost there because they don't see a way out of it. Man, I signed up for this because I was excited about making stuff better, and I just feel like I'm just getting beat down now because my charter's not good enough, or my daily presentation's not good enough, or my follow-up's not good enough. This is the opposite of the culture that I want in my organization. And I signed up for it thinking I was going to do a good thing, but holy moly, this is too much work. This stinks. I'm less engaged than I was before I started this. All right, so what is the better way? The first one is take a deep breath and letting go of being perfect. So I've never seen a perfect Kaizen. I've never seen a perfect DMAIC project. I've never seen a perfect company. If there's one out there, I hope at some point in my life I get to see it, but I've never seen one yet. And what we've got to do is recognize that people grow, organizations grow when they struggle. Right? If I want to improve the way my body looks, I have to go to the gym. I have to change there's things I have to do to make that improvement. The same is true in every facet of our life. If we want the department to perform better, we've got to let them struggle with their problems. We've got to let them work through it. We've got to let them refine it. There's no such thing as a perfect project. There's no such thing as a perfect CI system. So let go of being perfect and say, all right, are we better than we were a month ago? If the answer to that's yes, then you're on the right path and keep going. If the answer to that's no, you need to reflect a little bit on why that is. The second one, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of wabi-sabi, but it's a Japanese expression, and it's basically there's perfection in the imperfections, right? So we may have a team that seems to fuss and cuss and bicker with each other the entire week, but at the end of it, they deliver an amazing process or improvement. It may be that, hey, we didn't get all the way through the 6S implementation in that area, but man, what they did looks great. And maybe they missed some stuff, right? So embrace the perfection of the imperfection. It's the effort that we're after, and the results will follow. The next one, keep the prep documents. I'm going to kind of summarize the last three. Keep the documents simple. As long as your team has got a clear and succinct problem statement, they're probably ready to go get after it. Your job as a leader in the organization or as part of the organization is to get out of their way and let them run. Let them struggle. Let them fuss. Let them make some mistakes. As long as it doesn't impact your safety or impact your customers. Does it really matter if they use the wrong shade of blue? Does it really matter if you would have put the table in a different corner? It doesn't. And so what you're doing when you turn people loose and say, guys, go make this awesome. I got your back. Tell me how to help you. You're creating a culture that wants to improve things, and they feel bought into it because it's their opinions that are happening. So keep the process document simple, turn them loose and let them run. And that is it, Mr. Scott. We want to turn it over to Q&A, and I'm sorry, one more thing, guys. If you're out there and you're working on continuous improvement and you're not seeing the results that you want, or you're thinking about starting continuous improvement, I would encourage you to think about reaching out. Let's have a conversation, email, give me a call, or even consider using somebody like me to help you steward your process. Outside perspective is really, really hard to get from an inside team. So that's why we exist. We want to help people and organizations be more effective, and we do that through training, coaching, and consulting.
Great. Thank you, Beau. And to our audience, it's about 12:39 Eastern time. We're going to take the next few minutes and open it up for questions. We've got a couple questions teed up, Beau. But to our audience, feel free to use the chat toolbar to submit questions to, and then I'll pose those to Beau as we go. The first question, Beau, I want to pose to you personally. I see a lot. I always see a lot of conversation on LinkedIn and social media and in person about Lean and Six Sigma, the similarities and the differences. You kind of spoke on that early on, how those are big aspects of how you drive improvement within your clients. Can you very briefly just talk about the differences between the two and how each methodology may lend its own individual advantages to continuous improvement?
Absolutely. So I think of them as two very different weapons to solve similar but different problems. One of the things that I learned from a leadership book written by a Navy SEAL was targets, weapons, and movements. So what's the target you're trying to kill would determine what weapon you select to use, which would determine how you use it, which is the movement. So for me, Lean is about culture, it's about teamwork, it's about getting everybody involved, and the idea is efficiency. It's speed and efficiency. Six Sigma is, in my opinion, more about accuracy and quality. So if I were going into an organization that hasn't done any Lean Six Sigma work, I would always encourage them to start with Lean. Once they get very, very efficient and very, very fast, then you put Six Sigma on top of it to say, all right, now how do I dial it in so I'm shooting bullseyes every time I pull the trigger? So for me, Lean's about culture and speed and efficiency. Six Sigma is about accuracy, quality, and precision.
Perfect. I think that's one of the better explanations I've heard. So thanks for sharing. Next question comes from Charles, Beau, and I hope you're ready for the curveball here. Could you provide an example of a typical project that you work on?
Typical. Well, obviously there are a lot of manufacturing type projects where we're looking at throughput and productivity. So how many widgets can I produce in an hour? How many items can I build in a shift? So there's always a push for throughput and velocity, right? How do I produce more with the same number of people or even less people? So the efficiency is a hugely typical focus. And then I've been getting a lot, and it's probably from your help with the APICS alignment on warehousing. So there's a lot of warehousing companies out there who either don't know how or haven't been able to wrestle with the efficiency of the warehousing operations. How do you line up your inventory? What's the picking process? What's the shipping process? Where should things be stored and located within a warehouse? So I think the majority of tactical kind of approaches or questions that I'm getting are on productivity and throughput. And usually when I get into the organization, I'm actually getting currently more work on the leadership side and the culture side, because they bring me in to talk about Lean. When I start interviewing people, I say, guys, we've got some cultural stuff we've got to work through. So I don't know if that answers the question. I don't know if I could say there's a typical thing, really.
So it's not, you're not just banging out widgets, Beau, right?
Nope, I don't have a widget to bang out.
Charles, good question. Hopefully that provides some context there for some of the things that Beau and the effective Syndicate does. Good question. Okay, next question comes from Myra. Myra asks, could you provide or direct me to a template for project charters?
Myra, I don't know of a great source. I'm sure if you Google Six Sigma project charter or Kaizen project charter, you can find a bunch of examples. I would encourage you to Google A3 instead. It could be A3 plus Lean or A3 plus continuous improvement, and just look at those 9 boxes. So for me, the standard is a 1-page charter. If I can figure out a way to shorten it beyond 1 page, that's fine. But anything longer than 1 page to me is not the benchmark. So I don't know if there's a singular source, But Google has the answer to everything, I think, and I would start with Googling A3. You could probably try A3 plus Project Charter and see what that shows you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next question I'm going to pose to you, Beau. You touched on successful Kaizen events, a lot of it from an approach or from a, how you set things up. Just from a sheer logistics, like what's in the room, what the materials you need. Can you maybe share a couple of things that you have found to be really useful for driving a successful Kaizen event? Any supplies you can think of that folks may not think of?
Well, I don't know if what people think of, Scott. I'll tell you that large Post-its, preferably the self-adhesive, flip chart Post-it sheets, markers, Post-it notes are kind of all required. One of the things that I try to do as I have time and support for it is to bring in some little distraction things. And there's a mountain of psychological studies behind this, but if you allow people to doodle on a notepad or play with a Slinky as an example while they're in a meeting, they're actually more engaged and focused in the meeting. And the reason is our brains are capable of processing about 100 times faster than I can talk, or that the people on the team can talk. So what it does is it allows your brain to have something on autopilot to kind of preoccupy it so they can actually focus more on the conversation. I don't know if that's a trick of the trade, but it's something that I've learned a few years ago that is, it's actually based in science. So that may be something people don't recognize or realize.
That's a good one. That's interesting. So 100 times faster than you can talk and maybe 7 times faster than I can talk, Beau, after a couple cups of coffee, right?
After 2 cups of coffee, I can't keep up with you, Scott.
So to our audience, I'd like to add one other thing as we're talking about successfully planning and running a Kaizen. I had a former partner that did a lot of good work with Kaizen events, and one of the rules of thumb we always used was making sure that different aspects, different sections, different departments of the business are included. We all look at problems differently. And it's really important whether it's from finance or from operations or from supply chain or warehousing. We have a good diverse group of folks in the room that will provide a different set of eyes and ears for the problem that we're trying to get better at and address. So that's always been a good rule of thumb on our end. All right, so Beau, you mentioned APICS, and we're delighted to have you on our APICS Atlanta Executive Advisory Board. You're also a member of the organization. If I'm not mistaken, I saw where one of your team members will be speaking at our dinner meeting coming up soon. Can you share more information about that?
Are you ready for this slide?
Absolutely, sure.
So, yeah. Yeah, so the next event that I'm doing is actually a workshop in October 27th, and it is focused on results-based leadership. So what I'm trying to do is help people move away from management. So we do a lot of management, time management, create the schedule, timesheets. So it's the tasks, I think, of being a department manager, being a group manager. And what's lacking, that again, I'm getting more pull of from anything right now, is the leadership side. So how do you create inspiration, create motivation, create communication around getting the results that you want beyond the tasks that are involved? So it's focused on how do we get the results that we want through better or more effective leadership.
And that workshop is APICS Atlanta is pleased to be facilitating that workshop and hosting Beau on October 27th. And to our audience, you'll see that on the slide in front of you. We've made that workshop to be free for veterans to attend, and we're also donating all the net proceeds from the event, thanks to Beau and him working with us on that. To all the net proceeds will be donated to APICS Atlanta Charitable Initiative. So we've got a variety of programming that's set up to help support our Veterans Transition Task Force, our Skills Gap Task Force, and our gender gap task force, where it's addressing some of the industry gaps when it comes to providing leadership opportunities for all. So would love to have you join us. That event, again, is October 27th in Atlanta. More information can be found at apicsatlanta.org, or feel free to shoot me an email at evp@apicsatlanta.org. And Beau, one last question, and then we're going to move into wrapping things up. I see where Tim Monahan is going to be presenting. One of your team members will be presenting at the APICS Tri-State dinner meeting on October 17th. And looks like Tim's going to be presenting on the supply chain value stream. So looks like you're pretty active out in the APICS community.
Absolutely, Scott. And I apologize for missing the connection there. So Tim brings a wealth of lean knowledge. He's been doing lean for a long time, and he also brings a unique component of IT leadership. So I am super thrilled that Tim has joined us. He connects a dot that a lot of organizations miss. So they've got a good CI thing going and they're making improvements, but the IT thing kind of gets disconnected or left behind. So Tim brings a wealth of knowledge on that. And the topic of looking at your supply chain through a value stream map lens is talking about what is the value added, non-value added items. What are the 8 waste in the process? So how do you evaluate your supply chain relative to the ideas behind lean manufacturing? So Tim's a great speaker. He brings a lot of energy, and he's just a wealth of information. So I'm sure it's going to be an outstanding event.
Okay, terrific. Well, thanks for all of your time and perspective today to our audience. We're going to be concluding our session on a couple of final items. First, again, the PDF version of today's presentation and the recording will go out to each registrant. You can also find the recording as a podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud in the next few days. Also, we hope that you'll tune in for our next Supply Chain Now radio session, where we're going to be featuring Rob Stevens of Five, who's going to be speaking on the topic of the magical world of supply chain sensors. Rob's going to be sharing information on this growing technology application within the supply chain space. So this session is going to be held October 17th. And more information can be found at apicsatlanta.org. And when you visit that site, our chapter's website, make sure you click on the Supply Chain Now radio tab to find the registration link for the webinar. And again, as Beau mentioned, we certainly encourage all of our audience to join us here in Atlanta for our upcoming Results-Based Leadership 101 workshop. Again, free for veterans. We want to support veterans' efforts to transition successfully into the supply chain career field, as well as their professional development initiatives. So free for veterans, come out and join us and see Beau in person. He does good work. Finally, we'd welcome you to join our APICS community. Again, you can learn more at apics.org, or you can check us out, again, our chapter website, apicsatlanta.org. If there's anything we can do, feel free to reach out to me. We're happy to serve as a resource for you and your organization. Hey, Beau, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on your end?
No, thank you all for your time. I mean, I guess the final thought is again, just to reiterate, keep it simple. If you're doing CI, you're thinking about doing continuous improvement work in a formal kind of setting and getting it going out there, keep it simple. It doesn't need to be complicated, and when you complicate it, you actually slow down the effort. So that's hopefully the message that has been loud and clear, is you got to simplify it and keep it simple to make it work.
Terrific. Great message to close on. So wrapping up today's show, again, we want to give a big thanks to our guest speaker, Beau Groover, for joining us today. Also, a big thanks to Beau for conducting the October 27th event on a pro bono basis. That's always appreciated with our APICS Atlanta nonprofit. Of course, a big thank you to our audience for participating on behalf of APICS Atlanta and Supply Chain Now Radio. This is Scott Luton concluding today's episode and wishing each of you a very successful and safe weekend. We hope to reconnect with you again really soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.